and welcome back. As you can see, I have a new drum set here, and I'm excited to share it with you. But before we get into the unboxing of it, let me just give you a little bit of the backstory with why I was drawn to it, where I got it from, and a little bit about the story of this kit. So I got my first vintage drum set when I was in high school. I think I was about 16 or 17, and it was from my high school drumline instructor, who was a great supporter of me really deep diving into drums. It was a 1965 Ludwig Club Date kit with a 20-inch bass drum, 12-inch rack tom, 14-inch floor tom, and a matching Pioneer snare. This kit was in their champagne sparkle finish, which is a really beautiful color if you haven't seen it. And at the time, I was really digging into jazz music, and every kit that I had owned up until then were fine and nice, but they were bigger drums with 22-inch kick drums, 12 and 13-inch rack toms that were deeper, and 16-inch floor toms. As I was digging more into the jazz genre, I needed something that could better demonstrate that sound and tonal quality. So I got that set for $700, and my drumline instructor, Jay, God bless him, let me make monthly payments over time, even through the Christmas season, as I got a little money from family. And he let me take it until I could pay it off, and it became mine for good. I had that set through the rest of high school. Then when I went to college, it sat at home and I didn't really use it at school, but I would always come back and play it. When I moved back to this area and got settled, I left it up at my teaching studio because I was living in an apartment at the time and couldn't play it there. It didn't make sense to leave it at my folks' house. And eventually I sold it just because I didn't want to take it to gigs. I didn't want to use it on the road touring at all, for sure. And as I left it up at my studio, it wasn't the best kit to use for teaching with students because it wasn't very similar to the drums they have at home. And again, the fragile nature of vintage drums really isn't built for 12-year-old kids playing AC/DC. I've always kind of regretted selling it, but honestly, most of the drums that come through here, I don't keep with the thought of using it for the rest of my life. It's just me being a steward of it until it can go to the next user. Lately, over the last 6 months or so, I've really been missing that Club Date kit and thinking how great it was for a variety of different styles of music. And compared to a lot of the other vintage drum sets I've owned over the last 10 years, it was actually pretty well built for the gigging musician. And they're not that expensive because the Club Date kit was a budget level kit from Ludwig at the time. So it doesn't have the same value to collectors as a lot of their other drum sets. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, I've been keeping an eye out on Reverb, eBay, and Instagram, looking at Club Date kits, and I've found a number of them at different drum shops all over the country. And if you're on Instagram and you're a drummer, I'm sure you follow many of these shops that pretty much exist online and sell direct with one person working out of a spare bedroom of their house. I was scrolling one of my favorite Instagram drum shops pages, Rick's Drum Shop, and found a Club Date kit there for sale for what I thought was a pretty competitive price, and then he offered a special on Black Friday, which made it even more affordable. So I took the plunge, purchased it, and I'm really excited to have it here now. So let's go ahead and unbox these drums and take a look at what's inside. So here it is, my new to me 60-plus-year-old drum set. This is a 1965 Club Date, just like the one I had before. One of the things that's very unique about it is it has a paint finish, this black finish, and you can see some of the flaking and chipping of it I think that might be indicative of it being lead paint, so if it starts to really flake off over time, I might need to remove it all just in a precautionary matter, because I have dogs that walk around the floor of my studio and I would hate for them to be eating this up and causing any problems. But I sort of like this flaking look. I think it shows the wear and tear and the story of these drums. And that brings up another point. This is definitely a player grade drum set. It's got nickel hardware on the lugs for all the drums and a lot of the other fittings, but like the hoops on the 12-inch are not nickel. So it doesn't match perfectly, but again, I really like player grade vintage drums. One, because they're way more affordable. Two, I don't feel as guilty when I tinker with them and potentially drill a hole or augment some of the original fittings of it. And then three, it's much more suitable for me to take it to gigs and actually use it. That's my goal with this kit. I want to be able to take it to gigs. I want to be able to use it down here for session work. And these are my favorite size drums of all time. I removed the saran wrap on one of the hoops. It took way too long. And I love here, you have the black hoops, which would be standard even with a different color drum. But you get an inlay strip. Usually that would match the wrap of the drum. Here it's like a silver sparkle. It almost looks a little white, but I think that's just the aging of the inlay. Again, pretty beat up, but that doesn't bother me because I'm probably going to beat up these drums over time as well. Now also, they were nice enough to include a little bit of merch. Shout out to Rick's Drum Shop for the t-shirt, a shop rag, which is great for dampening and getting that muffled sound a la Ringo Starr come together, and then a few stickers, which is great because if you know me, I have a sticker wall in my bathroom and I love to collect stickers from almost everywhere I go. A few things about these drums that I really loved about them before. The first is on the toms, we have the internal mufflers, and this bat style kind was my favorite of any vintage drum. I think they work really well. It's a small pad on the inside, so it doesn't kill the drum when you turn it on, but it does just enough to control the overtones. So that's on the rack tom and the floor tom. They're both present. On the floor tom here, the legs here are this very unique design that Ludwig came up with. They're spring loaded so that you can insert the leg and then adjust the height without actually needing to tighten or loosen a wing nut, which I think is really ahead of its time for Ludwig. They do have some problems where if the spring ever slides out, it's a total pain in the butt to put back together, but I think they're pretty cool. I might swap them out, but we're going to talk more about that later. The floor tom legs are here. They're straight. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I don't think that's going to be a big deal for me to swap those out if I want. On the bass drum, we have a rail mount for the rack tom. These actually hold up pretty well, but they're not very great if you're going to take it to gigs because you need like a wrench or a tool to be able to loosen and tighten this rail mount. It doesn't have any sort of finger tightening mechanism. Now, before I get to getting the heads on this bass drum and setting it up and playing it, I want to talk a little bit about where I got it from, Rick's Drum Shop. Now, the founder, owner of Rick's Drum Shop is actually a man named Zach, and I was looking up on his Instagram page. He has a stories collection about the backstory of his drum shop and where the name comes from. Rick is actually his dad's name, and he credits naming it after his dad because of his dad's love of carpentry and woodworking, which was really influential in Zach in tinkering with drums, messing around and fixing them and restoring them. And so as he put this drum shop together in a room in his house, he dedicated the name to his dad. I can totally relate to that story because my dad is also a woodworker, and from the time I was a small kid, I was in the garage working with him, building furniture. And when I first got into messing with drums, it was me going over to his house and using his router table and his table saw to mess with them. He certainly was a huge help for me getting started with this whole field of working on drums. That makes this kit more special to me, that I share that same relationship with Zach. But the really cool story about this kit is something he told me about it after I bought it. And that is that this drum set, before it belonged to me, belonged to David Raouf, or more commonly known as R. David R. on YouTube and social media. Dave is one of my biggest influences in the content creation game and tinkering around with drums, and he was a huge help to me without him even knowing it, just by making so many videos showing you how you could fix up your drums, augment them, improve them, or just have a crazy idea and execute it on some spare drums you have. I remember seeing this kit in some of his videos, and he had a video where he went through like all 30 or 40 of his drum sets and talked a little bit about each one. And I remember he talked pretty fondly about how much he liked this kit. And so I'm really honored to have it now and be, the next caretaker of it. And again, it's something that makes this kit more special to me. I'm sure this kit had a life well before it was in Dave's hands or Zach's, but it's pretty cool that I have it now. So the goal is to be able to gig with this thing. So there's a few changes I want to make. I have one of the DW rail mounts that I used on a kit last summer, like an old MIJ kit. I think it will fit in this whole pattern here where this rail mount is. So it'd be great if I could install that. That's a little more durable for gigging and also has the flexibility of adjusting without using a tool. So I want to change that on here. I already have it. Hopefully I can install it within the next few days. This tom mount here has the same thing where you need a tool, a wrench, to actually be able to tighten and loosen it. But Ludwig made a bunch of these tom mounts with small variations, and I have a few in the back that actually have a wing nut. So I think I'm going to swap that out, whether it be just the wing nut on here or the whole bracket. It should fit. That'll make it much easier to use for gigging. The next thing I want to do is swap out these floor tom legs. I do think they work pretty well, but in the end, I'd much rather just have something that's a little bit more trustworthy and durable. And so I'm gonna measure this hole spacing here, see if I can find something. When I looked it up online, it seemed like these holes were 2 3/8 inches apart, or 2 and whatever the next 16th degree would be away from that. It's pretty hard to find a tom bracket with that spacing. But even if I can find something close and just file out the holes to make them a little closer together, I'd be willing to do that. If you hate that idea, leave it in the comments and let me know. But this is my kit. It's player grade. I don't think I'm disrupting it if I make it a little bit more user-friendly. And then, of course, I need some new heads on here because I don't blame Zach at all, but these heads are just mismatched and kind of thrown together to work with these drums. Because in reality, if you're buying a vintage kit or selling one, and in my experience doing this, whoever's going to buy it is going to put new heads on it right away, likely, whatever their preference is. So I don't spend too much time trying to get like the perfect head combo on here. So I'm hoping to get some Evans heads over here soon to really spruce this kit up and get the most out of it. Follow me along for the journey, and then we'll get these things set up, play them in the studio, and hopefully bring them to some gigs really soon. So there you have it. That's kind of a lower tuning. I know that some people would probably call that medium low, but I think for these size drums on vintage shells, that's probably in the lowest end of what you can expect. Before I get too far into critiquing the quality of the drums and the build out, I just want to give a shout out to Evans. They sent me all the heads for these drums, and I'm using coated G12s on top, which are kind of my favorite top head because it's perfectly in between a single ply G1 and a double ply G2. So you can get the advantages of thicker heads and like more durability and a bit more lower end and punch, but then you can also tune them up and they can act like single ply heads for jazz and bebop styles. So it's great for someone like me on these sorts of drums where I would really want to have a wide variety of options. On the resonant side of the toms, I'm using coated G1s. It might seem a little odd to use coated heads because the texture is really generated for brush playing, in my opinion, but coated heads give you some warmth, characteristically, right? So I think it kind of further accentuates what I like about vintage drums, which is the warm, round, tubby sound. On the bass drum, I'm using an EQ4 calf tone on the resonant side. Again, a very warm sounding head. And then an EQ4 frosted on the batter side, which I don't know if it's technically half coating, but that's the way I think about it. It has a texture coating on it, but it doesn't have the full-on warmth of coated heads. It's kind of in between coated and clear. So I like it for its flexibility, which kind of goes with what I'm looking for with these drums is flexibility, right? You just heard them in a low tuning, and I think they can play rock and roll. I'm probably not going to play a Metallica tribute gig on these drums, but that was never going to be the case. They do their job. They can get low and thuddy. I could use muffling and some other tools to even enhance that more, which maybe I should show you now. I'm going to go ahead and just turn on the internal mufflers on the toms so you can hear the little difference that makes. It's very subtle. It's just a kiss of that muffling. And I really like that. On a gig where you might be in a room that's a little abrasive or reflective, this can just take a little bit of the bite away, but not be over the top. Sometimes even if you put a moon gel on a certain drum, it just kills all of its life. This, I think, just tunes back a little bit of that sustain, which is perfect. It's extremely utilitarian for working drummers, and even in the studio, where you might need to augment the sound here and there. I want to tune these up because I think we all know that vintage drums have this ability to sing in the high register. So I'm going to do a little bit of work on the drums, then we'll hear them in a higher tuning. I really like how they tune up. They can definitely do the bebop thing. They're plenty versatile. Now, aside from the sound, let's just talk about some of the modifications I did to this kit to make it more gig-worthy and make it my own. The first big thing is probably the rail mount here. This DW rail mount fit perfectly within the whole pattern because it has some positional versatility, so it'll work on a lot of vintage drums. But what's really great about this is, in addition to being able to loosen things up and adjust it easily by hand and not needing a tool, You can also take it off very easily and throw it in your gig bag. And then you get a lot more flexibility in terms of the height of a drum. And that's because you have a few different points of angle adjustment here. So you can lower the whole unit or you can raise it up higher, which makes it work better for a lot of people who would want their rack tom at varied heights. Aside from that, it's just much more durable. You still get a little bit of bounce with this bass drum and the tom moving. That's gonna happen no matter what, unless you have a drum that's super heavy and full of concrete. But I don't think that's the sound we're looking for. The tom bracket on here, it still is slipping a little bit. So if I find that to be an issue, I'm just gonna order the modern Ludwig version that matches the same hole pattern. It does the job fine, it's mostly staying in place. I've just noticed it moving a little bit when I'm bashing, so I have to crank down on that wing nut a little more. Now let's talk about the thing that probably is going to trigger many viewers out there, the floor tom. On here, I did widen up these holes with a slightly bigger drill bit, and then I sort of took those holes and narrowed them closer together so it could fit this bracket, which is like a 1/16 of an inch smaller than the old Ludwig ones. This thing is so much more sturdy and reliable, and I have no worries about it slipping on a gig, being a pain in the butt as I'm packing up and moving. And unfortunately, I think those old spring-loaded floor tom legs, even though they are cool and unique, I don't trust them for gigging. So this is much more reliable. The only thing I haven't changed that I think people would maybe bring up is the bass drum spurs. And as far as vintage spurs go, they're mostly all terrible, but these kind that are the disappearing sort that like go back into the bass drum, they seem to be okay. Having this kit is very exciting for me. One, because it really brings me back to my days of high school and college, really honing my craft of becoming a better jazz drummer on pretty much the same instrument, just in a different color. So it's nostalgic in that way. And then two, the story that goes along with it, with Zach and Rick's drum shop, who I bought it from, but then also David R. Seeing this in his videos, and now it's here in my studio where I do very similar work. It's pretty special. And aside from the fact that these are amazing drums to play and sound really great, it makes it all that more special to hold on to and have as this like token of my work and experiences. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I don't want this to just live here in the studio and be one of those vintage kits that I'm afraid to take off the shelf and use. I want to bring it to gigs, and I have a big band gig tonight that I'm playing, so I'm going to bring these out. And then I have a jazz church service I'm playing on Wednesday, which also happens to be Christmas Eve. And so I think these would be very well suited for both of those gigs, and I'm going to bring them out and get some footage for you guys. I don't think there will be audio because who wants to listen to Christmas music whenever this ends up coming out in the new year? So I'd love to hear what you guys think about these drums, so leave a comment down below and let me know. And until next time, thanks. Thank you.